it was a story about a man who had 3 wives who wanted to go to Mecca. And so I mean, that's the dream of your lifetime, to go once in your life to Mecca. So the man told to the 3 wives, let's go to Mecca. And one of the 3 wives said, yeah, but that's good, but you know, all our children, one has to take care of the children. I will stay here, I will take care of the children of everybody. And you three, you can go, I will take care of the house and of all the children. Okay, so off they went, and at night, one of the 2 other wives went to a well, and she fell inside the well. Okay, then the man tried to get her out, but he also fell into the well. So the 3rd wife was all alone, so she went for help. She met a lion. And so she said to the lion, you need to help me, my husband, Ivan, my rival, the other one fell in the well, so please help me to get him out. And so the lion said, okay, but on one condition, that I can eat you afterwards. And she said, okay, that's okay. Okay, that's the story. But then the quiz. The quiz on the radio was, we have now 4 possibilities. What is the right answer? First answer is, the woman said, you can eat me after you help to get my husband and the 2nd wife out. Okay, I have promised, so I have to do that first. Second is, I mean, it's the woman who fell into the well, who was so stupid to fall into the well. She should be eaten because she was so stupid to get into the well. Third possibility is the man should say, okay, she promised, but now we will fight man to man, lion to man. The one who wins gets it all. Okay, if you lose, you have to get off. Nobody will be eaten. If I eat them, okay, you can eat everybody. And the 4th solution was the woman that refused to go to Mecca, she has to be eaten. Okay, big discussion. And they asked us what we would say. We both said independently, she promised, so she has to be eaten. If there was one thing that they all agreed on, that was the wrong answer. The 3 others you could discuss, but certainly not, I promised to be eaten, now you have helped me, so now you can, you can eat me. That was certainly a wrong answer. The answer that was most liked on the radio was the women who refused to go to Mecca. She had to be eaten. Which, in my opinion, I wouldn't even think of that as a solution. The nice thing is when we told that in Senegal years afterwards, the Senegalese says, of course, you are wrong. I mean, you didn't understand anything about it. I mean, it's certainly not the one who promised who has to be eaten. Okay. And that's when you realize that you're in a different setting. Okay, I was born in Bruges, 1955. Bruges is the same town as his dad, and it's renowned worldwide museum style, but in fact it's one big village. I mean, if you come from Bruges, I remember in my high school, or even my primary school, we had one extravagant person, we had one adopted child from Congo, so he was black, so that was that was really something in the school. We had a black in the school, so I'm coming from my climate where I grew up was very village-like. If people come from outside Bruges, we hear it immediately because we have a very strong dialect. I was supposed to be world-oriented compared to most people from my high school, but that's where I come from. So I'm from a city. On the other hand, I think it's a village, certainly what I saw afterwards. I mean, it's one big village. Oh, and then Bruges, to set it in Belgium, I mean, the Bruges and the surroundings, I mean, there were 2 possibilities because the working opportunities were quite low. So either you stick to Bruges, either you hit the road. Okay, many people from Bruges have gone on the road. I mean, and if you look at it like in the foreign affairs, in the embassies, or if you look at communities of Belgium abroad, it's often people from that area. Bruges and then the coast. In Belgium, that was the area that went away, or they stick there for their life in the same house, in the same village. So I think you have a bit the 2 extremes. So like my first job was, I went illegally in Afghanistan in '82, so, and we went illegally across the border in the middle of the mountains, 2,000 meters high, and I did the man, and my wife did which was a very good experience. But that was consultation because there was no system. So after 6 months we were exhausted. So, and it was agreed that we would come back after 6 months. I mean, even earlier, but we stayed 6 months. But you're exhausted because you work all the time. But the day you go, I mean, everything. So the next time we went to Afghanistan, to Chad, also a war. But then we were in a system. I mean, in an area a bit bigger than Belgium, 2 doctors, and we got a letter from the ministry. You are in charge of health in that area, and only you. So I mean, you arrive and you decide what you're doing. How will you organize your hospitals? How will you deal with problems? How will you, the resources you have? I mean, just like we were taught in Antwerp. So that was, okay, that were our first experiences. Yeah, well, in '82 we went to Afghanistan. It was illegally. It was doing consultations. Okay, it was daily routine consultation, and I mean, routine was at least 1 shot wound a day. That was in wartime, but we were in the middle of the mountains. The funny thing is that there I realized for the first time, if you are in a wartime country, I mean, we were confronted with shot wounds, but not from the war. It was between tribes, but not against the Russians. We never had any problems with the Russians or with it was, I mean, it's a violent society, and we were there, well, okay, emergency, trying to do some consultation. The second was Chad. There we stayed 3 years, so we were in charge of a prefecture. That was for 3 years. Then after that we went to Senegal for 7 years in Senegal, and that was a bit the same, except that there we had 2 Senegalese colleagues, much more nurses, a smaller area but much more people. So we did that for 7 years. And then I went to London for 3 years. So then I went to Vietnam as a medical parasitologist in charge of a malaria program for countries, but much less, I mean, profoundly. So now I'm in Asia, Latin America. Bit too hard. Same for Chad. I wouldn't be able to do now to live how we lived in Chad as we live. I mean, as we lived later. If, for instance, Chad, I mean, you have to. It's Chad is 2 times France. Okay, it's very big. Only 5 million people live there. When we went from the capital to our little city, they call it the city. If you look at the map, it will be on it. Bokoro. It's only 15,000 people. But since it is in the middle of Africa and there is nothing there, usually Bokoro is marked, because there is place on the map to put it. So it was only 15,000 people, but we had an area of Belgium where we had to, I mean, we were in charge. So when we went to visit places, or when we heard that there was an epidemic, we had to go there. We slept outside on the sand, a mosquito net over us, and I mean, the people were always very friendly. The people of the villages say, "Oh, you sleep here tonight. I mean, we will have a party." A party there was just eating together. They cut the throat of a goat and then we eat together. And sometimes, depending on which village, if it was a Catholic village, we drank some beer. If it was a Muslim village, we drank some tea. But we slept on the sand. I mean, and they were very hospitable, and it was very nice. But I could never different. Always very, very different. So of our long-term experience, let's say Afghanistan, Chad, Senegal, Vietnam, the most difficult to integrate was, of course, Afghanistan, for sure. But it was hard because we were disturbed all the time, but also because people didn't have anything. I mean, Chad was rich compared to Afghanistan, but in a different way. I mean, in Afghanistan, after the harvest is there, they know how much food they have for the next harvest, and so they divide it. They know exactly how many grams they can use per day. In Chad, it was very poor. It was drought. We had famine. But after the harvest, you had a party. I mean, there was a big party of 7 days after the harvest. Means that they were starving quicker than if they would have divided like in Afghanistan. On the other hand, like Vietnam, it's a very hard society. but we didn't have any, we didn't have too much problems with it, at least after a while, because at the beginning I thought it was very hot in Vietnam. The first month was much hotter than Africa.
Yeah.
But once you get to know it, then it's okay. But the first month was not easy. Afghanistan was in a way the hardest, because not for many things, but not because Afghan culture is the most different from Belgium. I would even say on the contrary. Maybe Afghan culture and Belgium is, if you, in a way, much more similar than in Vietnam or the African countries. Let me explain. In Africa, sometimes things happened where I couldn't find the logic. I could not understand the logic of certain things that happened. In Afghanistan and in Vietnam, I always could find a logic in why and what, and when they did something, okay, there was a logic. Not that I always agreed, but at least there was a logic that I could see the logic. In Africa, the two countries where we lived in, sometimes I couldn't understand the logic. So in that way, it's more difficult. But at the beginning, I did certain things that were certainly not appropriate. Let me give you one example. In Chad, it took, we were already there 3 years, it was the end of our stay. We had 1 year and a half famine. It was the famine of 84, 85, so it was a really big one. And I remember that we had to be very strict. We had to say, okay, we had food, because we got some trucks from the World Food Program. We had to decide who was getting food or not. So it's a very hard decision. So you have to be very, very strict. By the way, in real famine countries, when people are hungry, they never protest. They are very. Nobody ever contested our decision for this one gets food, this one gets food. In Chad, we often said to the people, your child looks good, looks healthy, so that's okay, looks good. And by accident, we found out months after that you should never say that. You should never say to a mother, your child is in good shape, because then you attract the ghost. Okay? So, we were amazed and we said, well, why didn't you tell us? And I said, yeah, but we knew you didn't know. So then it's okay. Okay? But if you say that tomorrow, then you will do that on purpose. And then that's not okay. Yeah. So, and those are things we didn't know. But when I talked to them in Vietnam later, they said, yeah, you should never do that. So in Vietnam it's the same thing. And I had here a secretary when I talked once that knew, she was from Italy. They said, in Italy you should do that. Say to the mother, your child looks good. So, but there's something in Belgium that we never have this problem. But apparently in many countries worldwide, you should never do that. Say to a mother, your child is in good health, that's okay, looks nice, because you attract the evil, the evil side. So, and that is something at the beginning when you first get out. You do things because you don't know. But after a while, you start. Everywhere it's a bit the same. Let me give another example of in Afghanistan. When we arrived the first day, the governor of the region where we were inside Afghanistan, he asked us a question. The question was, why did the king of Belgium give you permission to come here? And I answered that the king had nothing to do with that, which was true, but except that I didn't understand his question. His question was, what are you looking for here? Why did you come here? His question was not about the king, it was, why did you come here? And it's kind of language that at the beginning when you're young you don't understand, that you give a direct answer to say, yeah, the king had nothing to do that, I decided myself. Wrong answer. It was a right answer on the question, but I didn't understand the question. The real question was, why did you come here? And our translator afterwards explained, there are only 3 reasons. Why do you come here? Why you would come to Afghanistan? 3 reasons. Either you have done something bad that you cannot continue to work as a doctor in Belgium. First reason. Second reason is you're such a bad doctor that you have to come to a place like Afghanistan to make a living, because in Belgium you are not good enough to make a living. third question is you will make a lot of money. So the real good reason is you make a lot of money. And in Africa it's the same. I mean, if they ask you why do you come here, it's because I'm well paid. Because the two other reasons, that's not what you want to be acquainted with. No, very curious, huh? Always. Yeah, always very curious.
Not really fear?
Yeah. No, we never had. The only thing in Chad, they told to the children that if you're not a good boy, the white will come. So we sometimes had that when we arrived in the village, that we saw the children run away, and then they told us laughing that they had told the children, if you're not a good boy, the white will come. But they were always very friendly and never fear. What is interesting is that when you live really in communities, you will get a different idea of the cliches. Most striking example is that my wife and I, we lived in Hazarajah in Afghanistan, so high in the mountains. We are both convinced that if I would have to choose to be born as a woman or a man in those mountains in Afghanistan, I would choose to be a woman. Which the cliché says that it is, that the women are very bad treated and that the men are having everything. The two of us were convinced of the opposite. I mean, I didn't have any friends in Afghanistan because the translator told me, be careful because if they give you a present, they want something in return. Which was true, but you have to see that in survival. The man is in charge of assuring the survival of the families. And so they are under a huge amount of stress. So I got a lot of people with stress problems. Because they were soldiers, but also because they had all those problems to deal with. The women, once you're inside the walls, the four walls, you get the food that you have to prepare, you get the tissue you have to make clothes of, you get the material that when you don't have to worry about how to get it, that's the man who has to do it. And I saw that like when my wife was sick, people from the village came to make life more, even if she was sick, to make it more agreeable. Come their hair together, they were chatting with a translator, but sometimes because the translator were male, and even without the translator, she could feel warmth and she got presents, no return, and so I had to be more careful because those people try to survive. And so in a way, life as a woman, as long as you get along with your mother-in-law, it's more, it can be very nice. Yeah. Frustrating on the moment, certainly Vietnam at the beginning. No, they have a very strong feeling that they have to do it, they decide. And at the beginning you feel like, when I arrived I was in the Malaria Institute. There was about 300 people in that institute, and when there was an event, there were almost 500 people because universities from all over Vietnam came, so you had those mass organizations, and then you had the two old men of the Muppet Show, me and a Danish. We were the two international friends. We had to sit in front, and it was international friends. So at the beginning I thought, well, what can I do here? We were not allowed to do it ourselves, they were doing everything. But then slowly you see that you can interfere or say, there, I think that. My most displeasant experience at that time was, I was in a malaria project and there was very few malaria. So I realized very quickly that the definition of malaria there was completely different than here in Belgium. Malaria in Vietnam is everything that cannot be explained, every fever that cannot be explained by something else is malaria. Which is quite different than if you say that if you find a parasite of malaria, then it's malaria. So I was there in a malaria project and I realized that 95% of my malaria cases were not malaria. So I told that to my secretary and I explained also in that circumstances, I don't think it's wise to put everywhere microscopes because this means, in that setting, that a microscope, a microscopist, that if he looks at 100 slides, that he will maybe, if he's lucky, see one that is positive, and most probably he will have to see several hundreds before he can have the chance of one positive. which means that two things, or three things. Either he will not look at it anymore, he will say negative. Either there will be peer pressure from the nurses to say, if you ask a slide, he never sees something positive, so he probably doesn't know what he's looking for. Or the third thing is that, and so with the danger that they will not ask slides anymore, or the third possibility is that he will, sometimes invent to say something positive when it is not positive. So that's how I thought. So I explained her that during a tea discussion. And a few weeks later, there was a happening, as we had these happenings, that at noon I had to come to sit with the minister and eat with him. And it was not my best day, I can assure you that he said, I heard you are against my policy. Well, I don't dare to be against your policy. I heard that you are against microscopes at all levels, you think it should be at reference points. And he gave me a hard time, and it was not pleasant, I can assure you that it was not a friendly conversation. It was and why do you think that? And why? So, unpleasant. At the end of the day, there was the wrap-up of the seminar, and the minister stood up and he gave the conclusion of the seminar. And when he had finished this, I know something else. And it had nothing to do with the seminar. And I don't know what the seminar was about, but suddenly he says, and by the way, we have a new policy for microscopes in Vietnam. We will not do it in every health center anymore, we will do it in reference centers. So although I had a very hard time and I didn't feel well at all after this lunch, he must have thought in the afternoon, maybe that's not supposed to be really, so he said, that's my new policy. Well, Vietnam is Confucius. Confucius is the state decides and the people, it's like the grass and the wind. When the wind changes, the grass leads. So they want to have a very strong state. So it's up who decides for law. That's why also communism and Confucianism go very well together. But it's not so simple as that, because they also have a very strong say at province level, at district level. Everybody has their say. So it is a combination of Confucianism and about decentralization. But anyhow, it's group. If the team leader, if the director says the sky is red, everybody will say the sky is red. As a foreigner, sometimes you can say, are you sure? I think it's blue. So if the chief doesn't change opinion, if your direct colleague says, yeah, I also think it's blue, but I think it's still red because the chief says it's red. It's not always, it's very, it's the group decides, and as a foreigner you can have a confrontation to question that, but you have to do that very carefully. I remember that during my first year there, in the middle of a conference, one of my graphs was shown. I had given this graph to nobody. So somebody had taken it out of the computer and used it during a presentation. And afterwards I came to say, did you like it? Because, you would never do that in Belgium. But in Vietnam, it's not a problem. That's common property. For some, yes, for some, not. But then, of course, you have to understand that if they want to survive, they need to have extra salary. To have a good life, they need it. In the Malaria Institute, all my collaborators have a second job. In BTC, they also had that, but that was less of a necessity. That was not the problem of salary, because that salary was much more decent than when I was in the Malaria Institute. But I find Vietnamese, they can work hard. It's not like this that the Asian work much harder than the Belgians, for example. That was not the case, because in the institute I had a reputation of working much harder than they. But since there are so many, if everybody works some all together, you can go quite a way. But I wouldn't say that the cliché of that the Asians are working harder than the Europeans. I don't think that's a right cliché. On the contrary, like the Japanese, I find them quite inefficient. But there are so many, and they work so many hours, because they work much more than 8 hours. The thing is done anyhow, but we do much more in 8 hours than what they do, because there are much more rules.